Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Senior Living Sizzle, expert-led discussions on the industry's hottest topics. The Senior Living Sizzle is super powered by Heart Legacy, which is home to SalesMail, Senior Living's #1 video tool. Today, I am joined by not just one special guest, but two. Katie Churchill and Amy DePreker are industry leaders that I know you all are going to love learning from. So let's welcome Katie and Amy to the show. Thanks, ladies, for being
Hello.
here.
Thank
We're
you.
happy to be here.
Hello. Yeah, this is going to be an awesome conversation. So before we do get too deep into the good stuff, I always like to share just a little bit of a framework of what we're going to be covering today. And after attending Smash last week, I got to thinking about the customer journey Walk of Fame that Smart Girl Digital hosted and how that's super similar to what we're talking about here today with an employee or a team member's journey from recruitment to hiring, onboarding, and beyond. So, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you to just talk to us a little bit about the recruiting piece of this process, any tips or best practices that you might have for that stage.
Yeah, so I like to relate everything back to my sales and marketing days in senior living, actually. And so, at the community level, we always say, everybody is selling. Everybody is responsible for the sales and the marketing in the community. Well, and that's the same thing for recruiting, right? So everyone should always be recruiting all the time. And so I like to think of it as three different buckets, really: speed to lead, which translates over to resident, sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Calling immediately, reaching out via, phone call, text, email, sales mail, getting in touch with that candidate as soon as possible, because I can tell you there are 20 other operators that are also doing the same thing. Consistency, people are busy. So calling after hours, shooting a text even, hey, I'm just thinking of you. When can we connect? And making sure that there's more than one way, I guess, for them to be able to return your phone call. I like to ask candidates, like, how can I get in touch with you? What is the best way for you? Especially nurses, they're busy. They're looking at it maybe on their watch and they're like, oh yeah, I'll deal with that later. And so I like to make sure that I'm being very cognizant of them and what they're doing and what they're going through, to make sure that they can feel comfortable getting back in touch with me, whether it be email, call, or text. And then flexibility, being flexible in scheduling your interviews. These candidates are working, most of them, and so they can't come during 9 to 5. That's their time to be at their current job. And so being flexible in when you're scheduling interviews is really helpful for the candidate experience as well.
Beautiful. I love all of those best practices and tips. Amy, I'd love to hear from you, just anything that you'd like to add to that or your experiences.
Yeah, I agree with Katie a lot. I love the speed to lead piece. I think that
Always.
you really have to be proactive in the recruiting process. I mean, like you can't sit back and wait for applicants to come through. You really have to, you get better candidates when you are recruiting and reaching out to them. I always loved wooing people away from their jobs. I really always loved to be able to convince them that we are the people they want to work for. So really being able to sell that value proposition to them, you have to always remember that these candidates are your customers too. So really being able to sell your company and the position to them is extremely important. So, and again, too, like Katie said, using different methods to communicate with candidates, I think is extremely important. I love the video piece, keeping people informed, along the process that we're going to talk to about today. Really using that video messaging is so much more impactful and powerful and leaves a lasting impression. I think people really need that. So.
Yeah, I agree fully. And I think that I've started to do this just in my own, the work that I do, and asking people, how do you want to be communicated with? Because if we just assume everyone wants to be communicated with via email, but they prefer text or they do prefer to pick up the phone and talk, we're really missing the mark and we're going to miss some really awesome opportunities.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So those,
You brought up a really good point, because even by generations, so we did this
yes,
at Argentum, by generations, the way that people want to be communicated with is so vastly different. This is going to sound so terrible, but like, I don't really answer my phone a whole lot. But if you text me, like, up there.
Quit.
Millennial, like we grew up on that. Like that's what we did.
Yeah.
And so it's also really interesting as we continue to recruit across all different generations and even different job pools, nurses, sales, whatever it might be, ops. It is interesting to see how people respond most of the time. And most people prefer text or, like sales mail, text, link, there it is, it's done,
Yeah. So let's shift a little. Is there anything else that you want to add on the recruiting? I think we've really kind of covered some good ground here on, it sounds like being proactive and being mindful of who we're talking to, when we're talking to them. That's something that I was going to bring up later in the conversation is just, generations within the workplace and how we navigate all of those. You brought it up when it comes to communication, but there's also a lot of different desires, and what success looks like is a little bit different for different generations, right? They might have a desire to be in an organization that provides them purpose and maybe not worried about the compensation as much, right? And so figuring out what that looks like based on where they are. So let's talk about the hiring process. So something that I had just made a note about before in prepping for this conversation is I'm super curious on how we maintain a process of consistency and customizing the candidate experience. So Katie, I don't know if you want to start with that and we'll pitch it over to Amy afterwards.
Consistency is key within anything that you do, right? It's creating the good habits of how you function and how you work. It's the same thing with exercise, right? Creating that good habit makes you want to do it. So I've heard. I don't have that habit yet, but that'll come eventually.
We're going to get there.
But I think, keeping it simple and always resorting to the basics. We all have literally computers in our hands 24/7, right? And so keeping it very simple of reaching out and making touch points and meaningful touch points, I think is where it's even more key. There's really no like magic, method or secret sauce to recruiting. It really is perfecting your basics, making sure you continue to remain consistent in who you are as a, brand and also the type of person you want to be as a recruiter. But, I really love daily planning. When I'm going to call, who I'm going to call, what are my must do's first thing in the morning kind of deal. But I do also have to be flexible and understand that sometimes like what my type A personality thinks is going to happen for that day could totally implode and totally change. So it's also being flexible, but being consistent and remaining on who I need to touch points with. I also think too, just like how Amy was mentioning, was candidates, just like residents, do need to be courted and recruited. They need to be showcased how your opportunity outweighs or is more beneficial to them than the other one down the road. And so it's really important to continue to showcase your exceptional culture, getting to know the candidate and what makes them tick to show this is how our company or how our opportunity can continue to give you purpose in your career. And I think that is something that we think, the moment they walk through the door, they see our culture, but that's not always the case. It's talking about maybe if fundraising is something that's really important to them, talking about things that you're doing in your greater community to fundraise and how they can be part of it. And, so it's really is getting to know the candidate and essentially like rolling out that red carpet, just like how we do to new residents, but to our candidates as well.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Amy?
I agree with Katie. I mean, communication is key through this process too, the stage of the process. Like Katie mentioned earlier, there's 20 other companies that are potentially courting this candidate as well. So really being on top of that communication with them and really rolling out the red carpet and making them feel like royalty in this process where, they really want to be a part of this company. Again, need to be able to sell yourself during this process. I think in the past I've used even video tours of, as a convince tool for candidates, just kind of what a day in the life of their role will look like, and really go over what the daily tasks are and even be honest with the challenges of what it would look like for them, to try to really get them onboarded and recruited with the company. And that's worked great in the past.
What a great idea.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
really,
we had the exact same face. We're both like,
I don't pick draw up off the floor. That's
but
such a great
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, so and it really has helped. I mean, if people could get a little glimpse into what the organization looks like and what the day in the life looks like, it's a huge selling tool. It really is to really get them recruited and onboarded. So we've even used, residents in our hiring and onboarding process. Just really, because in the senior living side of things, we've had them in interview, being in the interviews
Oh,
with our candidates. They're a huge selling tool. And people, they want to see who they're going to be working with, and it also gives you the opportunity to see what the candidate is like interacting with your residents. So those are just some of the little ideas that I've used in the past that have been hugely successful for us in that hiring. But onboarding is key. I mean, consistent onboarding, having a strong onboarding process, including people in the process, like these candidates out of the gate from day one, really just having them be a part of just being a part of the team. I mean, if there's meetings out of the gate, have them involved in that, so they feel like a part of the team.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like an agenda of, hey, here's what to expect over the next 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, your calendar's ready and stacked with meetings.
yeah.
No,
And nothing impresses a candidate more than early interaction and engagement with senior leadership. I mean, and again, we've the with our hiring and onboarding, we've used a lot of processes that includes that right out of the gate. And like Katie said, and that even the week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, really having that senior leadership involved in that makes you feel included in the
Mhm.
organization, out of
and
the
like you're
gate.
already part of this team, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
Mhm.
they're not trying to get me on the team. I'm on the team. I'm part of the team. And this is what it's going to look like. You
Mhm.
both have brought up excellent points around expectations. That was another note that I had that I wanted to be sure to communicate, which you've basically already covered. But using all of these different modalities to convey those expectations. And hey, this is what you can expect. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it might feel like. And Amy, I love that you have used video in this process, of course, and seen success with it. I've also seen a lot of great success come from using the call to action button. So that call to action button might have your benefits package or that schedule that we were just talking about, and kind of giving them the tools in bite-sized pieces that they will need, but it's not so overwhelming.
Mhm.
So I love that.
I
There
agree.
was actually a topic at Smash last week about everboarding instead of onboarding. And I
Mhm.
liked that shift in the wording around it, right? We're forever onboarding because there's
Mhm.
forever going to be new things or changes or information that needs to be relayed. And if we can keep that consistent, all of our employees and our team are going to have a better experience, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think the everboarding is probably one of the most critical pieces to continue to have retention. If you
Mm-hmm.
have really rough everboarding experience in the beginning, it is
Yeah.
rough. There's no like agenda, like what Amy was saying. There's no like set of here's what we're expecting from day one. It makes it really hard then for that candidate to see, can I see myself working here long term? Is it unorganized of a company? That kind of deal. And we've had clients and operators take, the candidate that they hire from us out to dinner, the night before with their family or their spouse or significant other, and just really do the breaking bread, get to know you before you start working with us. And we've seen that just move mountains for candidates of feeling so welcome and into the, work family kind of deal. You
Yeah.
spend more time at work than you do at home. So these people, you really got to like them.
Yeah.
You
You
really
do.
do. You know.
And how better to find out than over a casual supper and conversation?
I We encourage lunches, dinners, coffees, whatever with our candidates. We encourage it with our clients and operators. And we think it is just such a valuable way to get to
Mhm.
know somebody and really see if you can see yourself spending that much time with them.
Mhm. I remember back in the day, I had bought a new coffee maker when I was an executive director in a community. And I loved making coffee for anybody who came in for an interview. And
I
it was
love that.
interesting how that kind of loosened them up and really gave them a feel of, and that's kind of like the dinner lunch thing. I mean, it could unveil things that you didn't see during that interview process because now you've given them more of a comfortable situation to kind of open themselves up. And it could sometimes show you things that maybe you didn't recognize initially that may make you change your mind on that candidate too, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
Like
is a great
how they
environment to
how
do
they
it.
talk to the waiter, the waitress, that kind of deal.
I
Totally.
mean, I made a cup of coffee for an LPN candidate once, and he put his feet up on my desk, and I was like, okay. I made him
It's like,
so
I have nowhere
comfortable.
to sit. You're
That
gonna
was
stay
too
here.
comfy.
Yeah.
I do think that it's just, you just added that right at the end about seeing how people interact with others, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that when someone's in an interview, they're like on their game. They're really trying to like prove themselves and showcase themselves in this really positive light. And being able to have opportunities to see those people and for those people to see you as the potential employer, how you engage and interact with people is super meaningful. So those are awesome. I love those ideas. So we're doing this trajectory of recruiting, hiring, and into retention. And as we have just about 13 minutes left, I want to spend some time around retention. So I just shared on LinkedIn yesterday, maybe it was, an idea around staff and resident weekly or bi-weekly, whatever that might look like, touch points. And having worked in senior living for the bulk of my career, I know that the reason I loved getting up and going to work every day was because the residents were there. And I knew I was going to get to help new families navigate this journey, but I had a whole backing of happy, healthy, vibrant residents to help me do that. So the more I got to know them, the more I felt fueled to continue moving new people and more people in. So I'm curious if there's any ideas that you ladies have on other ways to continue that everboarding and just retain those really good employees and staff.
I think that we focus so much on exit interviews with our
Mm.
team, and we really should turn that to stay interviews. Really take the time
Ooh.
to talk with your candidates that are with your not candidates, with your actual team members, and really interview them on, what's going well, what they need help with, and do that ongoing. I want my sales teams, I would have at least quarterly meetings with them just to see where they wanted to go, how they felt things were going. Because especially in sales, if they start to lose their passion for what they're doing, they're not going to be good salespeople. So really maintaining that communication with them and really interviewing them about what's working, what's not working, and supporting them through that, I think is key.
Mhm.
That's one of my thoughts on that.
Just a
Yeah.
quick note on that. I think that having something set up that's consistent, like
Mhm.
even just hearing you describe this makes me think of my one-on-one with my leader here at Heart Legacy, right? And so I know that we have this consistent touch point. Most of the time, we're always talking about what's going well and what we've got coming up. But it almost fosters this environment where if something is not, I already know that I have this relationship and rapport built in this space that I can bring whatever it is I need to bring to that space. Katie, what
Mhm.
about you?
I think a lot about retention in the same way that Amy, was mentioning of like, exit interviews really should be stay interviews. And I think a lot about career ladder programs and what we are doing to showcase to individuals how they can expand, out of the current role that they're in, if they so choose. But I think that there's also a lot of, well, how can I get to that level if I don't have that kind of experience now? And I think that that comes with a lot of vulnerability from the individual to open that conversation with their leader, but then also from the leadership team really showcasing to their team members that they care about their personal career journey and their career growth and helping them and supporting them in getting to that level of, hey, here's what we need to work on. And I really want to expand you a little bit by helping the sister community and mentoring that person and really honing in on those skills. And I think that being able to do that with other leaders underneath you and showcasing that you care about their career journey will then in turn correlate with your retention. And having them be part of the conversation. There's, I think that there's too many times where it's closed door conversations and it really should be open door conversations. And just really giving people an insight into what they can do to expand. Feedback is huge. Everybody wants it in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the number one rule is how do you accept feedback, right? And how do you want me to give that feedback to you? And I think asking that question to individuals to be able to encourage them to continue to grow is how you're going to see more of a retention.
Katie, you mentioned, really using your phenomenal pool of talent that you have in your team members to help with that ongoing training. And, people really want to learn and grow in their roles. And always, being in a VP role, you think you have to be the one that, evolves the trainings and, but really having them be a part of that not only empowers them, but encourages them to continue to have that trust in the organization and really that loyalty to the organization, and to tap into that is priceless. So I love that.
Yeah.
I am reading a book right now called Multipliers, and it's talking about leaders that are multipliers and how there's the know-it-all leader that is what you were kind of describing, right? Where they just think that they need to be the ones doing it all. And then there's the challengers or the multipliers that really challenge kind of the status quo on, all right, well, we've got an incredible team, a smart, capable, competent team. What do they have to say about this? And doing that does two things, right? It elevates the organization as a whole, and it helps those people who were asking that feedback from, it makes them feel more invested in the success that we'll inevitably have.
I'll never forget one of my VP of sales way back in the day. I was like, we don't have like a training program for new sales directors. And at that time, I was like a very new regional, like early 20s. I had like zero experience. I don't know what they were thinking, but I mean, they saw something, I don't know. But I was like, there's no training. Like, we don't have like a manual, nothing was online. Like, it was nothing. And so she goes, create it. And I'm like, me? Like, why? And she goes, you've done the job. If, I were to come in and train you, how would you want to be trained? And I was like, So, but it was one of those things where then I went and pulled all of my like best sales directors and I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And, it became this eventually onboarding training whole packet for new sales directors across the company. But like, had I not said anything,
right,
who knows what would have happened. But so it does take a level of vulnerability, I would say, which is hard sometimes.
It is for sure. But I always like to relate this back to, especially in senior living, this is the exact feeling that our prospects and families are feeling to navigate this journey with us.
Yeah.
I know I talk a lot about it from the video lens of, I know that showing up on video can be scary, but how scary is it to be 70, 80, 90 years old and walk into a senior living community that you have no idea what to expect? And so it's like, this still translates over. We're asking, but we can show up by doing it. And that's how people feel encouraged and inspired to do the same thing. All right. So I'm now curious about maybe some things to avoid, seems powerful, but maybe some things that you both have seen that you would just encourage folks to maybe steer clear from. I know we talked a little bit in our pre-conversation before we hopped on here about attention to detail being one of the things that's super important. But Amy, is there anything that you have experienced or seen that you'd like to share just as a heads up for people?
Yeah, sure. I'm in an interesting position right now. After 24 years of being the interviewer, my career, I'm on the interviewee side of the fence these days, and it's been extremely enlightening for me. And really hugely beneficial to me as a leader. I've learned a lot through this interviewee process, being on the other side of the fence. Some key pointers that I've kind of taken away from this experience. Phone screenings are not great. They really are not great. And I know that, with talent managers, you know, that initial pre-screen seems simpler as a phone screen, but it loses a lot of value. It really does. I mean, I really, and it could be my generation, but face-to-face is so important. And we have the tools now to be able to do it face-to-face, virtually. In person is irreplaceable to me. And again, I don't know if that's just because I'm old school, but
No.
um, phone
I agree.
screens are really tough. I don't think it gives me the opportunity to showcase who I am. And so I've really not loved the phone screen process. So anytime you really could make it virtual or in person, I highly recommend that. The other thing that I've learned is communication is key. I mean, you know, we always talk so much about the ghosting that goes on our side, you know, with really candidates coming in. The ghosting is real on the, on the interviewee side as well. You know, I'll send thank you emails, I will send thank you videos, and I get no response. And candidates really just want to know where they are. Just an acknowledgement of, you know, thank you for the time. It's okay to say we're not getting it. That's totally fine. But hearing it is better for a candidate than not hearing it at all. And really, too, when candidates reach out to you and after they don't get the job and ask for constructive feedback, if you have the time to do it, do it. I mean, people are really trying to grow in their the job search and really start progress in the interview process. So any feedback you could give to candidates along the way is really valuable for people that are job searching. So those are my three key takeaways from this from this process that I'm currently involved in. So it's been interesting. But
Yeah.
again, just communication to know along the way where you stand. If you don't stand anywhere, knowing that too, you know,
Yeah.
I think is important.
We did have somebody pop in a question. It just says virtual phone screens for all positions. I think what you were describing, Amy, is requesting not a phone screen, but even doing like a 15-minute Zoom.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. What I'm getting is, hey, I'm going to call you at 12:15 for that 15-minute talk, you know,
Yeah,
but really just doing it virtually, you know, just so you could see
for
who
sure.
you're talking to, you know, it
Yeah,
loses
it
something.
says for even frontline positions, I say, yeah, I mean, I know I use this quote a lot, and those that have seen me speak or heard me on this before have heard it 1,000 times, but video creates psychological proximity in the absence of physical proximity. And if you can even have a 10 or 15-minute Zoom call with a candidate, see their facial expressions, see how they're navigating the conversation, you're going to get a better read on a person than over the phone.
Hmm.
Mhm. If they don't have access for frontline, what I would say, if they don't have access to Zoom, you can always ask them if they can FaceTime.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because it is true, you know, being able to be face to face, whether it be through a phone or a screen, is so much more ideal than it is to be a voice on the phone, because you're not really
yeah,
showcasing your personality when you're smiling, when you're laughing, you know, that kind of deal. Just like how Amy was saying, you know, the 15-minute phone screens, you know, typically are just very general questions, right? It's not really allowing you to tap into your skill set as much as it would be for you to go in person and really answer some, you know, questions in person. Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah, for sure. Well, I can't believe that we're already at time. For
Me
those of
neither.
you that are still on here, please do, if you don't mind, use the survey that's going to come out right after this call ends. This is how we determine the topic. This topic came highly requested by all of you for the last two Senior Living Sizzles. So that's why we took a deep dive into this topic. Thank you, Amy and Katie, so much for your time, for your insights, for the information that you brought to us today. We super appreciate you. And thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. It was so
Thank
fun.
you.
Bye, ladies. Thank you so
Bye.
Bye.
much.